they're not the same like me. They just act differently. They're kind of like my friends, but I'm not kind of like the same as them.
Would you like to be the same as them?
Yeah, but I can't be. Because my brain works differently.
I was diagnosed with autism when I was 33 years old, so 3 years ago.
I didn't get my diagnosis till I was 15.
I was diagnosed when I was 29 years old.
Officially diagnosed at 31.
I was diagnosed with autism just this year at the age of 36.
I was diagnosed at 23.
I was diagnosed with ASD about a year ago now, so at the age of 21.
Anxiety,
Depression.
Attention deficit disorder.
Borderline personality disorder.
Bipolar.
anorexia,
Obsessive compulsive disorder.
I think I wasn't diagnosed till quite late because I was quite functional. I didn't cause many problems. I kept to myself quite a lot. I had a very supportive family. I was basically a selective mute till the age of 15. But yeah, I got through school fine. I had good grades. I had a couple of friends. So it was never really a problem.
I don't think I was diagnosed when I was younger because I fit in really well. I learned how to analyze situations.
I don't think I was diagnosed until I was 33 because female autism is just so well hidden. It really is.
I don't think I was diagnosed until late because I did a really good job of fitting in from the time I was a little girl to now. I can look back on my life and see all of the areas where I tried really hard to fit in, and I spent a lot of my time sort of intently watching what the other girls were doing and making sure that I acted like them and dressed like them and did everything that they did, even if it didn't make sense to me. And I spent a lot of time intently watching, characters on TV that I admired and studying them and learning out how to talk with their speech patterns or their mannerisms or their expressions. And now I realize that it was me trying to fit in. And I think that I did a really good job for the most part because it wasn't really caught.
I've spent my life covering up my impairments. My goodness. I learned very quickly what was socially acceptable and what wasn't, and I learned to be smart about my stimming, and I learned how to cover up my challenges, and just really through watching other people I learned how to be in the world. I learned how to make eye contact and how to speak, and really I learned to conform, which is really quite sad. I was always afraid of being caught out, but I guess I covered that up by being the loudest and the funniest and the most outspoken at university, at school, and I think people got the idea that I was really confident, but that in itself was my way of hiding this incredible fear and terror that I would be found out for who I really was and how I really felt.
I do cover up, which it does upset me sometimes, but I've just accepted that that's maybe something that I have to do. It shouldn't be something that I have to do, but unfortunately it is.
I've definitely covered up my impairments, and unfortunately covering up your impairments causes so much internal anxiety that the world doesn't see. So I have, sometimes I have a hard time understanding people, or I misinterpret things, and I've done a really good job at pretending that I understand exactly what's going on. Search engines like Google have been a godsend, because a lot of the times if I don't understand something, I can just Google it later and then catch up.
I made friends who would understand if I didn't quite fit in all the time. But I trained myself to learn how to speak to people. I trained myself in how to have a conversation with someone, and I watched people, and I read a lot of books to try and understand how people worked in their social situations. If I got overly stimulated, I just took myself away.
I had done a good job of covering it up to myself. So, of course, I had done a good job of covering it up with everyone else, I think. I memorized these rules and adapted them to my life in order to get by. So, I would learn them through friends, watching other friends talk amongst each other. I learned it through TV. I learned it through movies. I learned it through the books that I read. I was constantly trying to pick up on new ways to help myself interact better socially with my peers. A couple of my neighborhood friends who I would pick out certain personality traits about them that were seen in a positive light, or I saw have positive consequences, and I would just literally adopt that exact trait. I remember my one friend, it was how she was able to kind of be funny. Learning humor was hard for me, but I also saw that how she did it, and I would copy her exact sentences and her exact gestures and everything she did, and I would, try it out. And if it went well, then it's in my rule book for life.
In general, what we know at the moment is that men tend to receive diagnosis of autism more than women. So if you look at the partition between men and women with autism, you'll find that there are many more men than women with autism. That's saying that there must be a difference. If you're not finding a gender balance, there must be some difference between these two groups. Now, what that difference is much more difficult to say. So some people argue that the difference is to do with genetics, so that women have a protective factor against autism, and therefore they're more severely hit by autism, women that have autism, which is why you get the lesser disparity when you get to the low functioning end of autism. Some theories are suggesting that it's to do with the way the brain develops. So men are more prone to autism because you have this what's called the extreme male brain theory. So the push towards autism needs to be less in men than women. But another reason for the difference, or the perceived difference, could be that women are just going undetected. And this could be a social bias theory, if you like, of autism. So clinicians come to believe that autism is a male disorder. They look for the typical male behaviour elements of autism, behavioural elements of autism. And when they're faced with a woman with autism who's not showing all of these behaviours, then that woman is more likely to be diagnosed with a different disorder. So that may be a personality disorder or anxiety disorder. So it could be that we have this social bias. It also could be that women are much better at hiding their autism than men. So if you're growing up with autism and you're a boy, you're being socialised differently to a girl that's growing up with autism. So a girl growing up with autism may have parents who are emphasising social elements, because girls tend to play with each other more than boys. They tend to play in groups more than boys. They tend to be more empathetic earlier on in life than boys. So faced with a daughter who is not showing these behaviours, then parents may try to reinforce these behaviours, and then the child learns the social elements. Whereas boys, faced with boys who are not showing empathetic behaviour or not wanting to join in, parents may think, well, that's just a boy thing, and not reinforce the social elements. So girls with autism would be socialised in a different way to boys with autism, and that may be covering it up. Now, that's not to say a girl with autism is performing at the same social level as girls without autism. It just means that they have come to learn ways of fitting in.
Women are being diagnosed in more numbers. There seems to be a greater awareness around the possibility that a woman may have Asperger's syndrome. So we are seeing an increase, and with our autistic clients it's probably now about half and half males and females. Women have usually had a lot of experience with mental health services in various different ways, being treated for depression and anxiety, for example, and it's taken a while before anybody's really picked up on the fact that they may have difficulties with social engagement, with sensory awareness problems.
It's very individual, but I think what unifies them is their complexity, which is I think why they often get diagnosed as personality disorder, because it's very difficult to identify from their presentation one clear diagnosis. I think it's important that when looking at people who I think may be on the spectrum, to focus in on their sensory issues, because I think if you target and focus on them, it's often the core problem, and if you help them address that core problem, then the other issues are peripheral to that.
Autism looks different in girls because we internalise. The untrained eye can see a girl with autism and think that she blends in fine, but I can pick it straight away. Usually it's subtle movements in the body, it's intense eye contact rather than no or lack of eye contact. It's the way we articulate, we speak very well. Our knowledge on topics. My personal experience has been that many women and girls like me with autism are deeply compassionate, caring and kind individuals, and we can appear to be completely normal until something upsets us. Then you can tell, because I think we feel so much deeper than most people and think about something on levels that other people wouldn't even think about going to.
Girls with autism tend to be less disruptive and so kind of sink to the background. Girls with autism pick up on social rules and kind of learn to socialise a lot quicker than boys. And they're less likely to get so obvious obsessions and probably less intense as well. And girls are also much better at developing coping mechanisms and camouflaging mechanisms. And all of those suggestions kind of agree with what I've been through.
Girls have different obsessions. Mine was people. I just loved stories. I loved reading stories and watching how people would interact. And that's not seen as such a strange obsession as trains.
I really love music. I've been gifted with perfect pitch, so I love to play the piano, I love to sing. I don't have a lot of time anymore because I am a really busy mum. I love taking photos, love reading, and My special interests, you could probably guess that one of them is autism.
I love horse riding and I have a horse called Tommy. And I also really enjoy things like photography and I like writing. But I also really, really love science and maths.
My special interests include art, the tube, the London Tube. I'm fascinated by it. It's one of the few things away from my academic pursuits that I actually study and enjoy.
I do a lot of volunteer work with animals. I love animal causes. They're a passion of mine. I'm obsessed with serial killers and psychopaths, sociopaths. I really am fascinated by the way that the brain thinks, and I am especially fascinated with those who deviate from the extreme norm.
Special interests or hobbies are anything dealing with outer space. I love learning about black holes and physics. I love learning about physics as well, string theory and different dimensions and all that nerdy, geeky stuff I love reading about and researching and diving into, and I can focus for hours, and if my girlfriend would let me, days, weeks.
How does it feel to be a woman with autism? How does it feel to be a woman without autism?
Being a woman with autism, it feels like I'm weird, but not weird enough. So I pass as normal, but I'm not normal enough. I don't fit into the stereotypes that I think society would feel more comfortable with me fitting into.
I'm proud to have autism, and I'm especially proud to have autism and be a girl. And autism makes me unique. It means that I can see the world differently. Sometimes when I tell someone I'm autistic, they go, "Oh, but you're not weird enough to have autism." And I have to correct them and say, well, actually, first of all, people with autism are not weird, they're different. And secondly, I wouldn't have a autism diagnosis if I wasn't autistic. And that can be quite frustrating sometimes because people dismiss who I am, really.
Sometimes I feel like I come from a different culture. And when it's really bad, I feel like I'm a different species. Social situations can sometimes feel to me like a maths equation, and I'm looking at it on a blackboard and it's full of equations and I don't even know how to count. I don't have that basic knowledge. And I look at it and everyone else seems to have this knowledge of what to do. Like maybe they have a calculator and I'm there slowly trying to work through the most simple things.
It feels like a privilege, and then sometimes it feels really scary and really unsafe. And all I want is to be authentic and who I am, and that's really hard to do in a world where people are so afraid of that, and people are so afraid of difference. It's terrifying to feel that I have to minimize who I am and how I feel. I have to keep my impairments under wrap, and I feel I have to pretend I'm somebody I'm not in order to be accepted. What it felt like to be diagnosed was a combination of relief and hopelessness, I guess, and a lot of grief, actually. The relief came because I finally had an answer to every single question I ever had about myself, why I was so different, why I really struggled to cope. There were so many really interesting challenges that I have had all of my life that nothing else could explain, and nothing really made sense for me. until I got the Asperger's diagnosis.
I was quite glad to get my diagnosis because it explained so much. I've always known I was different, but I never knew why.
I first felt really relieved. It gave me a lot of answers for things that I had questioned for a while about why I did certain things or why I didn't do other things, and just not feeling as if I fit in totally. I've moved past kind of feeling the relief and then kind of the anger and depression and confusion and guilt, and there were so many feelings going on, to now more of embracing it and seeing that this is who I've been my whole life, and it doesn't make me any different. You know, it's just I see things a little bit differently.
I forgave myself and I let go of a lot of things from the past that I couldn't have reconciled otherwise, if not for a diagnosis.
I can't really describe it, except that, yeah, I was just a bit numb to it, but it was such a relief to finally have the diagnosis, to be able to say to people, I have ASD, this is why I struggle with certain things.
Being diagnosed was surprising and also a relief. I think growing up with undiagnosed autism, you know that something's different and something's wrong, but you don't know quite what it is. And then you hear all this messaging that everybody feels different and it's not just you and we're all different and unique. But there's this part of you that knows that deep down inside there really is something that's different and not quite right, and it does cause difficulty. And so having a name to this thing that you feel that makes you feel different is a huge sense of relief, because suddenly everything makes sense and clicks into place.
In the future, for girls with autism, I hope that girls can get their diagnoses earlier before they experience problems like I have, such as mental illness.
I'd love to see diagnosis and support changing among both females and males. I don't think that it's, right now we're doing it right by either gender. I think that we need to open the books again.
There's a lot that needs to change for females as far as support goes and as far as getting a diagnosis goes. I think the biggest thing that we can do to help with this aspect is just the education piece of learning about this end of the spectrum. But first, we really have to do the research on it. I think we need to look at this research that we've done, figure out really who we've done research on, which seems like we've done research on mainly Caucasian males.
It would be nice to have people to talk to who would understand. Yeah, not to sit on waiting lists after waiting list. I also would like to see more tailored support.
I do think that awareness needs to spread, and resources and support needs to spread and be more widely available, because there's so many of us out there than we think there are, and it's a silent suffering, because we may appear fine on the outside, but inside is just turmoil.
I see these girls struggle and end up on antidepressants and, you know, go through so many forms of therapy like I did, and experience being suicidal like I did. I mean, I was suicidal at the age of 11 because I knew how different I was, and nobody knew. Nobody knew how I felt on the inside. They just saw who I pretended to be to fit in. I don't want that. I don't want that for one single more child.
For all the children who are out there, there's not just you who think differently. I think differently. Some other children out there think differently.